Welcome, bros and brosephines. My name's Albrecht von Stollen, and today I'm gonna be talking about anime, Western animated sitcoms, and family. I got inspired to do this by the Mr. Enter, the most based of cartoon reviewers. Before anything else happens, let's go! One thing I've been noticing for as long as I'm alive is that Western animated sitcoms have essentially gone into certain cliches. As I'm going to be talking about family here, I'll be focusing on how Western animated sitcoms have been rather cliche when it comes to how family and male-female relationships are treated. For a comparison piece, I'll compare those to how anime does this. Let's start with how men are idiots in these shows. One thing that both Western animated sitcoms and certain anime have in common is how men are portrayed as extremely stupid to the point of being overgrown babies at worst. The most famous case of this in the West is The Simpsons. Homer Simpson went from an idiot who is lovable and well-meaning to an insufferable idiot. Seriously, one of Homer's best appearances is in Kiss Kiss Bang Bangalore. In that episode, Mr. Burns had outsourced the Springfield nuclear power plant to India, and while Homer is an idiot, he manages to treat the Indian workers properly and convince them of their rights. With that, Mr. Burns moves the plant back to America. The sad part is that this is one of the last times when Homer was likable. It's been going downhill even before that episode 15 years ago. The really sad part is that Western animated sitcoms tend to be very uncreative, all because most tend to be made just to cash in on trends. Family Guy is just a more violent knockoff of The Simpsons, complete with having one black guy as the friend of the main character. Peter Griffin had gone from a sympathetic idiot to someone who could kill off his friends due to his own stupidity. This is best seen in the episode Brian's a Bad Father, where he almost kills Glenn Quagmire all because Peter had shot Glenn with a loaded hunting rifle of all things. Both Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin are massive idiots who ruin everyone else's lives with their abject stupidity. Bart is an agent of chaos and all, but he went to being an activist in Bart vs. Itchy and Scratchy. Chris was a likable character, but fresh air turned him into an idiot who would be happy to marry his own dad, Peter, all because Chris wants to spend time with Peter, and Peter is greedy over his father-in-law's money. Sadly, they had spawned an archetype, the idiot male trope, and as such, other Western animated sitcoms generally follow this idiotic cliche to a T. For example, Glenn Martin is a Canadian ripoff of both Family Guy and The Simpsons, and Glenn from Glenn Martin is a selfish idiot. While Committed was based off a newspaper comic from Canada, it's known for derailing itself so hard that Joe Larson from that show is a wannabe Homer Simpson. Jerry from Rick and Morty is utterly pathetic as a dad that he can't even be bothered to stand up to anyone else in his family outside of his wife, Beth. To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. Thus, Rick is not an idiot. Checkmate. Really? Rick is a hyper-competent man, all because the guy is the power fantasy of r/atheism. Even then, he's a bit of an idiot himself. And I have something special for your precious Rick Sanchez later. The main exception to this trope is King of the Hill, but that's because Mike Judge doesn't do these types of characters in animation after Beavis and Butthead. With a good family, both the dad and the mom are virtue-signaling idiots, not overgrown kids. Certain anime are not immune to this either, as I've said before. Ketaro Urashima from Love Hina is an idiot who constantly gets smacked around by Naru Narusegawa because the latter is a painfully annoying excuse for tsundere. Nagasumi Michishio from Seto no Hanayome can't be bothered to pick one lady for him to marry because maharim. The sad part is that even in the 2010s, this type of character is still around, albeit in decline. Looking at you, Hideki Nishimura from Netouge no Yome and Kimihito Kurusu from Monster Musume. Hideki is useless against Aku's 8th grader syndrome, and Kimihito can't pick a woman to marry. Bunch of spineless idiot simps. A corollary to this is how hyper-competent women are in these shows. These women are so competent that they end up going neurotic upon marrying the idiot guy. Lisa Simpson went from a lovable daughter to an insufferable prick. This is best shown in the episode Bart vs. Itchy and Scratchy, where Lisa films Bart Simpson without his consent, all because Bart didn't like the all-female reboot of Itchy and Scratchy. Marge Simpson and Lois Griffin are both overly neurotic because they have to pretty much babysit their respective husbands. Beth from Rick and Morty is so neurotic as a character that divorcing Jerry only made the both of them even worse. Megan Griffin had turned from Peter's little girl to a punching bag, especially in Not All Dogs Go to Heaven and Seahorse Seashell Party. In comparison, anime doesn't really do this because anime is not The Simpsons, where it's a perpetual power measuring contest between the sexes. Another trope is the abusive man stereotype. Yeah, this is where Rick shines. I get that these types of characters are exciting and funny, but the way this is done, it gets very boring very fast. Let's look at Rick from Rick and Morty. You thought that I would spare him? Nope! The guy mistreats his son-in-law frequently, especially because Jerry is the butt monkey of that show. And then there's Peter from earlier. His stupidity makes him come off as being a douchebag, especially in the 2010s and beyond. In that same show, we have Brian Griffin. The guy abandons his son Dylan before using him to try get a job in the episode Brian's a Bad Father. In anime, this type of character is usually relegated to being the villain. And no, Rudolph Healer is the exception here. We also see woke social commentary in these Western animated sitcoms. This ranges from Family Guy making a botched PSA about domestic abuse called Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q, to Magical Girl Friendship Squad being about feminist magical girls, to Q-Force treating that show's LGBT characters and audience as nothing more than a bunch of offensive stereotypes rather than as actual characters and people respectively. I get that The Simpsons had originally started off as a social commentary on the life of a typical American suburban family. But now in the age of social media, overused social commentaries had become the norm. I had mentioned Kiss Kiss Bang Bangalore earlier, and I am of the view that it is a good example of The Simpsons doing social commentaries correctly. Why? Because in Kiss Kiss Bang Bangalore, it's able to deal with a real-world issue by poking fun at how absurd outsourcing is. This is shown by the fact that Mr. Burns had transferred the Springfield nuclear power plant to India, complete with how the electricity being sent to Springfield via undersea cables. If you want an example of The Simpsons making bad social commentary, see the episode Bart vs. Itchy and Scratchy. In that episode, the whole notion of all-female reboots is exposed for what it really is, corporate pandering. But unlike Kiss Kiss Bang Bangalore, where Homer was able to help his Indian co-workers, Bart vs. Itchy and Scratchy has Lisa turn into a hypocritical douchebag, all in the name of feminism instead of seeing the all-female reboot as what it really is, a corporate move to pander to women. As such, the typical all-female reboot treats women as nothing more than mere consumers rather than as human beings. Nelson and the guys all end up being very stupid, and Bart decided to go be a male feminist. But Albrecht, women's representation is good. What do you have against strong independent women, you incel freak? Well, here's the problem. Those all-female reboots and those purely LGBT shows tend to treat women and LGBTs as stereotypes rather than as characters. Sooner or later, people will end up normalizing their hatred on these types of shows. Why? Because people watch TV and internet shows to be entertained, not get preached at. As an example, look at what happened to Q-Force. That show ended up becoming unpopular with its main audience, the LGBT community. Anime doesn't do this type of social commentary because anime entertains, not preaches. The times where anime have done social commentaries, it was done in an entertaining way rather than shove whatever message that it has down their viewers' throats. As such, anime treats its audience as people, not as mindless consumers. So, what do the above tropes have anything to do with anime? Anime doesn't do these tropes a lot. This is because the Japanese are learning that imitating Western, especially American animated sitcom cliches are not just bad for entertainment, but also bad for society. I get that we all have free will and what we consume doesn't directly cause people to do bad things. That being said, the entertainment that we consume does influence us in one way or another, usually in subtle ways such as how we perceive things. As such, Japan has been promoting family-oriented anime even more starting in the 2010s, ranging from ones about siblings such as Himoto Umaru-chan and Kimetsu no Yaiba, to married couples such as Taisho Otomi Otogi Banashi, I Can't Understand What My Husband Is Saying, and Love Is Like a Cocktail. With Umaru-chan, Taihei is the main character and he's shown to be competent while his younger sister Umaru is both a slob at home and cares about her brother and her friends. The way this is shown is simply by making Umaru into a character rather than a walking stereotype. With Demon Slayer, there's Tanjiro who fights demons just to save his younger sister Nezuko. Both of them are shown to be quite competent. With Taisho Otomi Otogi Banashi, there's Tamahiko who is a person with a disability as his right hand got injured to the point of uselessness in a car accident. Despite of this, he stops being a pessimist and goes forth improving himself as of the most recent episode. Meanwhile, Yuzuki is shown to be kind-hearted and competent as well. With I Can't Understand What My Husband Is Saying, we get Hajime who starts off as a review blogger before he gets a job working as a web designer from home while his wife Kaoru was an office lady before she becomes a housewife. With Love Is Like a Cocktail, we have Sora who is a house husband. The guy works two jobs. He's a furniture designer and a part-time bartender. Meanwhile, his wife Chisato is an office lady. Now I know the argument against the last two anime I mentioned. Albrecht, real men work outside of the house. Those house husbands are weak beta simps. I'm gonna have to answer that argument too. With Hajime, he works from home so that he can spend more time with his wife. As for Sora, he already works two jobs with him working at a local bar as a part-time bartender being his other job. I am of the view that we need more married couple anime that have functional relationships in them because this will help spread the notion of healthy marriages. That way, people are more inclined to get married and be responsible rather than having adults live their lives like they're still in high school. The likes of Taihei, Tanjiro, Tamahiko, Hajime, and Sora are kind men and they're not pushovers. They're the kind of men who are able to stand up for themselves. They exude a healthy form of masculinity where they are confident in their competence while striving to get better at life. As such, they're better than the Rick Sanchez's of the world. Rick himself is a man who is essentially the R-atheism power fantasy character. An all-powerful being without the morality and responsibility that comes along with it. Thus, he mistreats his son-in-law among other things. As for social commentary, there is one family-oriented anime which had done this in an episode. I'm looking at Himoto Umaru-chan here. In the episode Umaru and Ebina-chan, we see the origin of Umaru's friend, Nana Ebina. Nana moves from her hometown of Akita to Tokyo so that she can find her brother and learn to live on her own. As she had arrived in Tokyo, she notices that people are staring at her because she is well endowed. That makes her uncomfortable because they're looking at her not as a human being, but simply as her chest until she meets Taihei, who looks her in the eyes instead of her chest. It is her reason for falling in love with Taihei after all. He treats her as a human being, not as her chest. In those few scenes, we see how treating people as objects is a bad thing without preaching to us about it. I am of the view that anime ditching Western animated sitcom cliches in favor of family is a step in the right direction. May Japan's neighbors, such as the Philippines and Singapore and South Korea among others, adopt this mindset too because the alternative is much, much worse. Please like, share, and subscribe.